everybody. A very, very warm welcome to the Wine with Jimmy YouTube channel. And I'm delighted to have you on board. Thank you so much for stopping by. This is a wine educational channel, which is designed to help those of you studying for those challenging but exciting wine exams, and to give you the confidence to really, of course, waltz into that exam and do your very best and come out with one of those certificates that says, I got a distinction. I can drink with a distinction. So here we are looking at the wines of the world for the Wine and Spirit Education Trust Level 4. That is the diploma. And we're on a Burgundy series. There is, of course, Clos de Vougeot in the picture. We are here looking at series 4. So this is on the Côte d'Or, the Chalonnaise and the Mâconnais, all a part of that central bit of Burgundy, so series 4, and we have an 8-part series to look at in this one, so fairly large again. So we are here talking about the introduction. So parts 1 and 2 will be available as free content on the world of YouTube, but parts 3 all the way to the end will only be available on my e-learning portal. You can go over there to www.winewithjimmy.com, click on e-learning portal, and it'll give you lots of options to subscribe, lots of exclusive content, lots of tools to help you with your studies. And of course, if you are social media inclined, then of course get in touch with the handles at the bottom of every slide. So let's start to look at the introduction and vineyard classifications of these areas. So the Côte d'Or, the Côte Chalonnaise, and the Mâconnais. So here we go. So as with many, many parts of France, the vineyards of Burgundy have been classified and delineated. But the degree of classification here is far more detailed in scale than any other parts of France. Why? Well, it's probably looking all the way back to the medieval monks who were first to start to split this landscape up in terms of really creating the unofficial crus of this area. But then, of course, going through moments in time like the French Revolution, but then also things like the laws of inheritance, which further fragmented this landscape up. So it has become quite complex. It's only really a small drop in the Vinous Ocean in terms of total production in France, but has 84 appellations. So there are plenty and plenty of little small AOCs to go through here, which of course include the Grand Crus, for example. The classifications are today based on such factors such as soil, aspect, and things like microclimate as well. So in brief, really, this is a classification of terroir, of course. So let's go through this 4-tier hierarchy that we find in Burgundy. At the bottom, which accounts for about a half of the production, is what we call the regional or generic appellations. So, for example, Burgundy, Bourgogne, AOC, Bourgogne au Côte de Beaune, for example, as well. In 2017, there was a regional appellation called Bourgogne Côte d'Or added into this. That now makes this 7 AOCs. And as I mentioned, representing for just about over half of the total production. Above that, we have the village or communal level, accounting for just over a third of total. And that's a total of 44 villages in this area. So, for example, Vosne-Romanée, Gevrey-Chambertin, Meursault, for example. So the village level. Then we have the Premier Crus. So this, of course, is examples like Pommard, Premier Cru, L'Hérugienne, amongst many others. There are over 660 what they call climats, or identified vineyard sites, otherwise known as lieu-dits. So climats, lieu-dits, pretty much the same thing. So 660 odd of these, they are an additional geographical denomination. So they do not exist in their own right as an AOC. So far below, you'll see the regional 7 AOCs, the village levels 44 AOCs, but the climats here, the Premier Crus, are actually incorporated within the villages. So they're actually identified as a village and then a certain vineyard within that. These account for about 1 out of 10 bottles found in Burgundy. Then at the top of the tree, we have, of course, Grand Cru. So, of course, the likes of things like Richebourg, La Tâche, Bata Montrachet, for example. And for these wines, the village doesn't appear on the front label. It's just the Grand Cru, which is identified being one of the oldest, most important sites generally that we find in Burgundy. There are 33 that are found in Burgundy, accounting for just 1% of the total production. And you must note here, we've gone back to each one of these being an AOC in its own right. So whereas the Premier Crus fall within the village, Grand Crus sit outside the village AOC. So they are named as their own right. And that's really why they lead with the Grand Cru on the label and not the village. There is one which is a little bit of an anomaly, and that is Chablis, that has 7 climats within its Grand Cru, but it still is only one Grand Cru, as we've mentioned on a previous series on Chablis. Some more around additional geographical denominations. Mentioned this a little bit about Premier Crus being into this category as well. So many of the appellations can be followed by an additional geographical denomination. Examples include regional appellations plus additional geographical areas that can be a general area. So things like Bourgogne, which is the big regional, and then Haut-Côte de Beaune, for example. Or sometimes a village can be affixed to it. Bourgogne-Chitry, which you can see up here on the slide, or Bourgogne-Épinal, for example, as well, from up towards the east of Chablis. So there you are, in terms of your additional geographical denominations. More on those as well. The village appellation followed by the name of a Premier Cru can happen as well. Meursault-Perrières as well, as you can see here. And then it says below, Appellation Meursault Premier Cru Contrôlé. It's a part of the Meursault village. And it's stating Perrières right in the name, sometimes hyphened with the village, which is where it gets quite confusing. And then you have got in Mâcon plus the name of the village. So Mâconnais, as you see here. But there are others like Mâcon-Versay as well. And of course, Grand Cru vineyards plus the additional geographic area. And I mentioned this earlier. So you can find Chablis Grand Cru, which is the one Grand Cru of Chablis, and then the specific lieu-dit or the climat, like Val d'Isère or Blanchot, or things like Le Clos, for example, which there are 7 in total of the Chablis climats. Now, some appellations, even at the Grand Cru level, are much larger than others. So, for example, the Clos de Vosges Grand Cru is slightly over 50 hectares, whereas the nearby Musigny Grand Cru is just around 10 hectares. And indeed, some of the Von Romanée style crus that you'll see here are around, well, one of them is just below 1 hectare. Many are just below 2 hectares. So La Romanée is the smallest at 0.84 hectares. So some of them can be remarkably small, some of them much larger. Typically, of course, village level sites and Premier Crus are larger than Grand Crus, but not always. And the classification system itself is not a guarantee of quality. As a result of those laws of inheritance by Napoleon I, the majority of the vineyards in the Côte d'Or are owned by more than one domain, and hence a range of quality can be achieved from a small appellation. Now, there are some areas which are monopoles, but they tend to be much rarer. And it really depends on the location, but the skill of the domain on what they craft from that, and also the philosophy of what they want to produce. You know, do they practice things like whole bunch? Do they cold soak? Do they like new oak? Do they like old oak? Lots of different philosophies in play. So as the key example here, as a result of its size, Clos de Vosges, over 50 hectares, has a multitude of owners. Actually, it goes up to about 67, I think, down here. So therefore, you're going to have a real multitude of expressions of Clos de Vosges because of the huge volume of producers, no matter how small or how large they can produce. But all will say Clos de Vosges on the label. So from the untrained eye, it all looks the same. But of course, there will be quite big differences. So that's the introduction, the vineyard classification, and additional geography included in that section. Please do join me for part 2, where we look at the Côte d'Or and also the upper slopes of the Côte d'Or. And we'll look at a bit of geography, a bit of cartography, and then throw in some wonderful Google Earth maps in that section as well. So please do join me for part 2. Any comments, questions, or concerns, you can get in touch with me. One thing you can do is comment on this video below, and make sure you please click like and subscribe whilst you are down there. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And if you do find yourself in London, please do come and see me for a class, a glass, or a bottle. I've been Jimmy Smith. Ciao for now. Goodbye.